The HOA president called the cops on me for moving out, like leaving the neighborhood was somehow a crime. I was loading the last box into my moving truck when Vivian Blackwood came storming down the sidewalk in her $200 yoga set, waving her phone like a weapon. "Officer, he's abandoning community assets. He's destroying our property values." The gravel crunched and popped under her designer sneakers as she marched straight toward me. Diesel exhaust from the truck drifted across the cul-de-sac, mixing with her overpriced perfume, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. Because while Vivian was screaming about community standards, I already had something in my back pocket that would flip her entire world upside down. Something she never imagined someone like me could pull off. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just looked her dead in the eye and said, "Vivian, you might want to sit down for this. What would you do if your HOA tried to stop you from moving out? Drop your city below. This is about to get wild." Let me back up and tell you how this whole war started. My name's Marcus Fletcher, and 6 months ago, I was just a guy trying to rebuild after the kind of divorce that makes lawyers buy vacation homes. I'm a construction project manager, Fletcher Contracting, with 20 years in the Army Corps of Engineers behind me. I believe in following rules, but I also believe rules should apply to everyone. Willowbrook Estates looked perfect. Quiet suburb, decent neighbors, cookie-cutter ranch houses from the 90s where kids actually played outside. The realtor mentioned an HOA, but made it sound like they just handled lawn care and snow removal. She forgot to mention the dictator. Vivian Blackwood ruled Willowbrook like her personal kingdom. 8 years as HOA president, real estate agent by day, neighborhood tyrant every other waking moment. Always in matching $200 workout sets, driving a BMW X5 so white it looked like she detailed it twice a week. 3 weeks after moving in, I walked outside to this crisp envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. The paper crackled like breaking bones as I unfolded it. Violation notice, unapproved commercial vehicle in driveway. My work truck. Clean, professional, F-250 with company lettering, parked in my own damn driveway. The morning coffee turned to acid in my mouth as I read the penalty. $75, payable within 10 days. Failure to comply may result in property lien. Here's where it gets good. 3 doors down, Bob Martinez has a boat trailer that's been rotting in his driveway since Memorial Day. Covered in pollen, flat tire, taking up twice my truck's space. Bob's violation notice? Nowhere to be found. Turns out Bob's wife works at Vivian's real estate office. Convenient, right? That night I cracked open the HOA handbook, 82 pages of bureaucratic torture, and found something beautiful in section 4.3. Board members subject to enhanced penalties for violations, as they model community standards. Double fines for board members who break their own rules. Game on. I spent 2 weeks with my professional camera, documenting everything. GPS timestamps, metadata, the works. Military habits die hard. Vivian's violations were everywhere. Her BMW blocking the sidewalk every morning for 12 minutes. City ordinance violation, $150 fine. 6 garden gnomes violating her own no lawn ornaments rule at $75 each. Security cameras pointed at the street without board approval. $200 per camera. While she was hassling me about my work truck, she'd racked up about 800 in violations. But here's what really made my blood boil. I knocked on doors, talked to neighbors. Turns out Vivian had been terrorizing this community for years. Mrs. Stella, sweet elderly lady next door, got fined $200 for her rose bushes being 2 inches too tall. The young family across the street almost moved because Vivian kept citing them for their kids' sidewalk chalk art. And everyone just took it, paid the fines, kept their heads down. The chemical smell of fresh paint hung in the air constantly because people were scrambling to meet her arbitrary color requirements. The sound of measuring tapes became the neighborhood soundtrack as residents desperately tried to comply with rules that seemed to change weekly. Then I discovered the real kicker. Property records are public information, and something didn't add up about Vivian's address. According to the county assessor, the house at 47 Maple Court, Vivian's premium corner lot palace, was owned by Clearwater Investment Holdings, LLC. She was a renter. HOA bylaws are crystal clear. Board president must be a property owner, not a tenant. Her entire 8-year reign was legally invalid. I sat in my kitchen that night, staring at the property records, and realized something beautiful. While Vivian was busy playing neighborhood queen, she'd been breaking the most fundamental rule of all. Time for a reality check. Armed with this bombshell information, I decided to test Vivian's commitment to her own rules. The next morning, I walked straight to her front door. The smell of expensive coffee and vanilla candles drifted out when she opened it, her face immediately shifting from fake smile to barely concealed annoyance. "Mr. Fletcher, what can I do for you?" I held up my phone, showing her the photos. "Just wanted to discuss these violation notices I'll be filing today." Her perfectly manicured eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me?" Section 12.7, no lawn ornaments. You've got 6 garden gnomes at $75 each. Section 15.4, unauthorized surveillance equipment, $200 per camera. And City Ordinance 147B for blocking the sidewalk daily. The vanilla candle scent couldn't mask the sharp tang of her sudden nervousness. That's different. Those are decorative elements that enhance property values. According to who? The rules don't mention exceptions for enhancement. I showed her another photo. Plus, Section 4.3 says board members get double penalties, so we're looking at about $1,600 in fines. Her face went 3 shades paler under that professional spray tan. But here's the thing about HOA bullies. They don't back down when cornered. They double down. Within 24 hours, I had 4 new violation notices crammed in my mailbox like passive-aggressive love letters. Grass height exceeds maximum 2.5 inches. They'd measured mine at 2.7 inches, with an actual ruler. Improper garbage container placement. My wheels faced the street instead of the house. Unauthorized door color variation. My forest green door was apparently 2 shades different from approved sage mist. Vehicle maintenance activities in driveway. I'd checked my oil. The crinkle of all that paper made my kitchen table sound like a campfire as I spread them out. This woman was literally crawling around with measuring tape at dawn, looking for ways to find me. That's when I remembered something my old army sergeant used to say. When your enemy gets desperate, they make mistakes. Document the mistakes. I spent the next week systematically photographing the entire neighborhood. Years of project management had taught me that patterns don't lie, and selective enforcement always leaves a trail. Professional camera, GPS coordinates, timestamps embedded in every shot. The soft click whir of the shutter became my morning routine. The results were absolutely beautiful. Bob Martinez's boat trailer, still rotting in his driveway, now with actual weeds growing around the tires. Violation notices received, 0. The Henderson family's basketball hoop, clear violation of the no sports equipment rule. Violation notices, 0. 3 different houses with grass over 3 inches tall. Combined violations, 0. Mrs. Patterson's decorative flagpole, direct violation of Section 8.2. Violations, 0. Every single one of these homeowners had either donated to Vivian's real estate charity events or used her services to buy their house. What a coincidence. Meanwhile, my documentation of Vivian got more damning by the day. Her BMW blocking the sidewalk at exactly 6:47 a.m. every morning while she scrolled through her phone. 12 minutes of illegal parking, captured in high-definition detail. Her garden gnome collection had actually grown to 8 ceramic violations, including a new welcome sign that broke 2 separate decorative ordinances. And those security cameras? 4 of them now, all pointed at public areas without the board approval she was supposed to give herself. From my construction days, I'd learned that building violations follow a simple rule. Document everything with photos, timestamps, and measurements. Turns out HOA violations work the same way. The next board meeting was going to be interesting. I showed up with a full presentation, not just random photos, a professional slideshow with violations cross-referenced to specific rules, penalty calculations, and legal precedents for selective enforcement patterns. 20 neighbors packed into folding chairs that squeaked like rusty hinges. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, while I clicked through slide after slide of documented hypocrisy. Based on my 2-week survey, Board President Vivian Blackwood currently owes approximately $2,400 in accumulated violation fees. Dead silence, except for the ancient projector's mechanical hum. Vivian's voice cracked. "This is harassment, Board members have enforcement discretion. Section 4.3 says board members face enhanced penalties, not exemptions. I click to my final slide. But here's what's really interesting. County records show you don't actually own property at 47 Maple Court. Mrs. Stella's gasp sounded like air escaping from a punctured tire. Clearwater Investment Holdings owns that house. You're a tenant. HOA bylaws require board presidents to be property owners, not renters. Vivian went from spray tan bronze to paper white in real time. That's a meaningless technicality. Actually, it makes your entire 8-year presidency legally invalid. The room erupted. Nervous laughter, excited whispers, and someone in the back row started slow clapping. But I could see those wheels spinning behind Vivian's panicked eyes. She wasn't surrendering. She was planning her counterattack. Vivian's counterattack came with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. 3 days after that board meeting bombshell, I found an official-looking notice in my mailbox. Emergency HOA session. Problem resident requiring immediate action. She'd called a kangaroo court to deal with me, but that wasn't the real surprise. Thursday morning, I'm checking my email over coffee when my phone rings. My biggest client, a commercial renovation worth 50 grand, calling to discuss some concerns. Marcus, we got a call yesterday about your company. Something about safety violations and unprofessional conduct? The coffee turned to ash in my mouth. What kind of call? Woman claimed to be from the Better Business Bureau, said there were multiple complaints about Fletcher Contracting. Look, we've worked together for 3 years, but our insurance company is asking questions. I knew exactly who made that call. The sweet, vanilla scent from Vivian's house suddenly felt like poison in my memory. That afternoon, while I was scrambling to save my contract, she was busy spreading a different kind of poison around the neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson cornered me at the mailbox with concern dripping from every word. Marcus, honey, Vivian mentioned you might be having some difficulties. Post-military stress, she called it. She's worried about everyone's safety. The metallic taste of rage flooded my mouth. This woman was using my military service, something I was proud of, as evidence I was dangerous. She said you've been stalking residents, taking pictures of their homes at all hours, following her around town. Following her? I documented her violations from public property during normal business hours, but Vivian was spinning it like I was some unhinged veteran having a breakdown. By evening, 3 neighbors had casually asked if I was doing okay and mentioned getting security cameras. The smell of backyard barbecues mixed with whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by. The emergency meeting was pure theater. Vivian had rearranged the community center like a courtroom, with herself behind a folding table elevated on the stage. The other board members flanked her like nervous backup dancers. We're here tonight to address a serious threat to our peaceful community, she began, her voice carrying fake authority. Mr. Fletcher's obsessive surveillance and harassment of law-abiding residents has created an atmosphere of fear. Then she played her trump card. I've consulted with legal counsel, and his behavior meets the definition of stalking under state law. Combined with his military background and obvious anger management issues, I believe we need to take protective action. The room went dead silent. Even her supporters looked uncomfortable. Using someone's military service as evidence they're dangerous? That was a new low. But here's what Vivian didn't know. I'd been digging deeper into her background too. Before we discuss my dangerous behavior, I said, standing slowly, maybe we should discuss why you're 3 months behind on rent. Her face went white. That's a private. Eviction notices are public record. Clearwater Investment Holdings filed the first one in March. The second one, last month. I held up the documents. You're not just illegally running an HOA as a renter. You're a renter who can't pay her bills. Mrs. Stella gasped like she'd been slapped. And here's the beautiful part. Your lease expires in 6 weeks. Month-to-month agreement, which means your landlord can terminate with 30 days notice. Vivian was gripping the table so hard her knuckles looked like white marbles. Those are confidential financial matters. So are the liens against your real estate license for unpaid client settlements. 3 of them, actually. Want to discuss those too? The room erupted in whispers. Someone in the back started laughing. Not cruel, just amazed at the scope of her deception. You're destroying everything, she screamed, slamming both hands on the table. I built this community. I maintained standards. I protected property values. Property values you don't contribute to because you don't own property here, I replied calmly. That's when the dam broke. Mrs. Stella stood up, her voice trembling with 8 years of suppressed anger. You fined me $200 for roses being too tall, while you're facing eviction? The young mother from Oak Street. You made us repaint our entire house, while you can't even pay rent. One by one, neighbors shared their stories. Harassment, arbitrary fines, threats of liens. 8 years of Vivian's tyranny came pouring out like water through a burst dam. But as the anger swirled around her, I watched Vivian's face change. The panic was being replaced by something colder, more calculating. She wasn't broken. She was planning her nuclear option. This meeting is adjourned, she announced, gathering her papers with hands that had stopped shaking. As people filed out, still buzzing with revelations, she caught my eye across the room. Her smile was pure venom. Enjoy your victory, Marcus. It won't last. I should have listened to that warning. Vivian's nuclear option arrived at 6 a.m. Friday, with the crunch of gravel under government boots. 2 city code enforcement officers stepped out of their truck, followed by a police cruiser. The morning coffee turned to battery acid in my mouth as they approached my front door. Mr. Fletcher, anonymous complaint about hazardous materials storage and unlicensed electrical work. Need to take a look around. Every contractor's worst nightmare. Code enforcement doesn't need warrants, and even false complaints can shut down your business while you fight them in court. What specific violations? I asked, but Rodriguez was already walking toward my tool storage shed. Improper chemical storage, unauthorized structural modifications, potential fire hazards. He read from his clipboard like he was ordering lunch. Plus reports of unpermitted electrical work. I watched them photograph everything, while neighbors peeked through curtains. The sharp smell of adhesive filled the air as violation stickers went up on my legally permitted workshop, my properly stored equipment, and the electrical panel that had passed inspection 3 months ago. These permits look legitimate, Rodriguez admitted, scanning my paperwork. But we'll need a full structural review to verify current code compliance. Translation: weeks of delays, thousands in fees, and my reputation destroyed while they investigated phantom violations. But the real damage was already happening. My phone started ringing before they finished the inspection. Second biggest client, then third, then my insurance company. Word travels fast in the construction world, and code violations might as well be a death sentence. Marcus, our underwriters are concerned about these safety reports. We may need to suspend your coverage pending investigation. 20 years of building my business, gone because Vivian made a phone call. That afternoon, she delivered the killing blow. A sheriff's deputy knocked on my door, his boots echoing on my porch like a countdown timer. Sir, temporary restraining order. You're to stay 500 feet from Ms. Blackwood and her residence for 14 days. The legal papers rustled like dead leaves as I read Vivian's petition. She'd painted me as an unstable veteran stalking her with cameras, threatening her safety through obsessive surveillance behavior. 500 feet. In our neighborhood, that meant I couldn't leave my property without violating a court order. Every photo I'd taken of her HOA violations was now evidence of my dangerous fixation. She'd weaponized the system perfectly. But here's what I learned in the Army. When your enemy thinks they've won, that's when they get sloppy. That evening, Mrs. Stella appeared at my back fence, her face red with anger. Marcus, you need to see something, but stay on your side of the property line. She pointed toward Vivian's driveway. A premium real estate sign had appeared. Blackwood and Associates, $485,000, luxury corner lot. She's selling the house, Mrs. Stella whispered. But how can she sell property she doesn't own? The pieces clicked like a gun being loaded. Vivian wasn't just behind on rent. She was trying to sell her landlord's house while eviction proceedings were active. The mailman mentioned she's been intercepting letters from Clearwater Holdings, Mrs. Stella continued, taking them straight from his truck before they reached the door. Mail fraud, real estate fraud, using my restraining order to prevent me from documenting her crimes. But then Mrs. Stella said something that changed everything. I called Clearwater Holdings this morning, pretending to be interested in the neighborhood. They said they're not selling individual properties anymore. They're liquidating the entire block as one package deal. My blood went cold. The entire block? All 12 houses on Maple Court. They need a cash buyer willing to close fast for tax reasons. The woman said they'd been trying to reach their tenant about showings, but she's not returning calls. I stood there gripping my back fence, watching couples tour the house Vivian was fraudulently selling, and realized something beautiful. While she was playing small-time con artist with one house, there was a much bigger game happening. Clearwater Holdings wanted to dump the whole street to pay tax debts. Quick sale, below market value, cash buyers only. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my divorce settlement paperwork and business financial statements spread out like a battle plan. Military VA loan benefits still available. Business credit line recently approved. And my ex-wife, ironically, worked at the bank that handled Clearwater's commercial accounts. The numbers worked. Barely, but they worked. Vivian thought she was destroying me with code violations and restraining orders. She had no idea she was about to hand me the keys to her entire world. The restraining order expires in 14 days. By then, I wouldn't just be her neighbor. I'd be her landlord. And unlike her, I'd actually own the property. The sweet smell of her real estate showing cookies drifted through my kitchen window, and for the first time in days, I smiled. Let her sell a house she doesn't own. I was about to buy the whole damn street. The next morning, I did something I swore I'd never do again. I called my ex-wife. Marcus? Sarah's voice carried that familiar mix of surprise and suspicion. This better not be about the divorce settlement. I need a favor, a big one. I took a deep breath. And it involves destroying the woman who's been trying to ruin my life. Sarah had always been a sucker for justice stories. It's what attracted her to banking law, and honestly, what attracted her to me before I became too passive during our marriage troubles. Now you have my attention. You handle commercial accounts at First National, right? I need an introduction to whoever manages Clearwater Holdings. The silence stretched long enough for me to hear my coffee maker gurgling in the background. The real estate investment company? Marcus, what the hell are you planning? Something that's going to make Vivian Blackwood's restraining order look like a love letter. 3 hours later, I was sitting across from Janet Morrison in a downtown coffee shop, my hands shaking slightly as she slid a manila folder across the scratched wooden table. Your ex-wife vouched for you personally, Mr. Fletcher. That means something in my business. Janet's eyes had the predatory gleam of someone who dealt with distressed assets for a living. She mentioned you might have interest in our Maple Court situation. The entire block? All 12 properties. We need them gone in 60 days to satisfy an IRS tax lien. She opened the folder with the crisp snap of someone delivering bad news to someone else. Cash buyers only. $2.8 million total. No inspection contingencies. My throat went dry as I scanned the property list. There it was, halfway down the page. 47 Maple Court. Monthly rent, $4,200. Tenant status. Vivian Blackwood. Eviction pending. What about existing tenants? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Janet's professional mask slipped into something uglier. Most are solid, but the woman at 47 Maple Court, she shook her head. 3 months behind on rent, ignoring our eviction notices, and now our property manager says she's been advertising the house for sale. The coffee shop noise faded to white static. She's what? Apparently she's showing the property to potential buyers, intercepting our mail, the whole 9 yards. We're considering criminal fraud charges. Janet leaned forward. Between you and me, we'd pay a premium just to make her someone else's problem. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. While Vivian was playing neighborhood dictator and filing false restraining orders against me, she was also committing felony real estate fraud against her own landlord. The asking price seems aggressive for the timeline, I managed. Tax liens don't negotiate, Mr. Fletcher. December 15th deadline, or the feds start seizing everything. She pulled out another document. Your VA loan pre-approval, combined with your business credit line, would actually cover the down payment structure we need. Sarah had done her homework. My ex-wife was helping me buy an entire neighborhood to spite my HOA nemesis. The irony was so perfect, it hurt. What happens to Ms. Blackwood specifically? Janet's smile was pure predator. New owner, new rules. Month-to-month tenants can be terminated with 30 days notice, especially ones with eviction proceedings already filed. The taste of victory was bitter coffee and sweet revenge. When can we start paperwork? Monday morning. But Mr. Fletcher, she leaned back, studying my face. Whatever this woman did to you, she's about to learn what real consequences look like. I shook her hand across the table, feeling 12 days of restraining order humiliation transform into something much more powerful. Vivian thought she'd checkmated me with code violations and court orders. She had no idea I was about to become her landlord. Monday morning, I walked into First National Bank carrying a folder that would either make me a real estate mogul or bankrupt me completely. The loan officer, Rebecca, had everything staged like a military operation. VA loan documents spread across her mahogany desk, business credit applications stacked in perfect order, timeline charts that would make a project manager weep with joy. Mr. Fletcher, your credit score and veteran status triggered our expedited approval process. She clicked her pen with the satisfied snap of someone delivering good news. VA loan covers your primary residence portion. Business credit line handles the investment properties. 45 days to closing. I'd learned something valuable during my divorce. Banks worship veterans with clean credit and steady income. What surprised me was discovering they'd practically throw money at you for deals this size. The bigger the loan, the more they want to help you succeed. Total package approved pending appraisal. But you're buying these properties at 70 cents on the dollar, Rebecca continued, sliding signature pages toward me. Frankly, it's the deal of the decade. Each signature felt like loading ammunition. Vivian had no idea the artillery was being assembled. From the bank, I drove straight to Home Depot. If I was going to spring a trap, it needed to look professional. The key was creating something visually dramatic that would photograph well for social media and local news. I designed a custom banner using construction-grade vinyl, the stuff that survives hurricane winds. Welcome home to Willowbrook's new property management, in bold letters, sized to stretch between Mrs. Stella's oak trees for maximum visibility from Vivian's front window. The banner company owner, a grizzled guy named Pete who'd done signs for my construction jobs, understood the assignment immediately. You want this thing to look official as hell, don't you? He grinned while measuring the vinyl. Rush job, but for what you're planning, this one's on the house. Next stop, legal weaponry. My attorney Mike had that predatory gleam lawyers get when they smell blood in the water. Marcus, this compliance agreement is either brilliant or sociopathic, possibly both. We'd crafted the perfect legal trap. New lease terms that would require Vivian to follow every single HOA rule she'd spent 8 years forcing on others. Grass height requirements, vehicle restrictions, decorative ordinances. Everything she'd weaponized against neighbors would now apply to her as my tenant. The beauty is that it's completely standard, Mike explained, reviewing the lease language. Every rule comes directly from the HOA handbook she helped write. She can't claim they're unreasonable since she's been enforcing them for years. But the real psychological warfare required community coordination. Mrs. Stella had become my unofficial intelligence chief, and her briefing that evening was thorough. Vivian's been showing the house twice a day. She told the Hendersons she's moving to Florida with $500,000 in sale proceeds. Mrs. Stella's eyes sparkled with anticipation. She has no idea her landlord is about to become her worst nightmare. The timing needed surgical precision. I coordinated with every neighbor who'd suffered under Vivian's reign. Potluck dinner for the day my restraining order expired. Kids playing in the street. The whole wholesome neighborhood celebration she claimed to represent. The banner would deploy at exactly 6 p.m. when people got home from work. Maximum audience, maximum impact, maximum humiliation. For documentation, I hired Jake Morrison, a videographer who specialized in corporate events. Community improvement project, I told him. Need professional footage of neighborhood speeches and reactions. What I didn't mention was that we'd be filming the moment a dictator learned she'd lost her kingdom. The technical details required construction-level planning. I measured sightlines from every house to ensure optimal banner visibility, tested audio equipment for clear speech recording, and coordinated with Mrs. Stella's grandson, who was studying photography to get perfect still shots. From my Army engineering days, I'd learned that successful operations depend on meticulous preparation. Every variable controlled, every contingency planned, every piece of equipment tested twice. While orchestrating the public humiliation, I was also planning the private improvements. These properties needed serious work. 8 years of landlord neglect had created a maintenance nightmare throughout the block. New roofs, electrical updates, fresh paint for every unit. I was planning to turn Maple Court into the model neighborhood Vivian claimed it already was, but under management that actually cared about residents instead of power. Most importantly, I prepared individualized compliance reports for every violation I documented over the past months. Vivian's garden gnome collection, her illegally parked BMW, her unauthorized security cameras, everything would be itemized in her first official lease violation notice. The restraining order expired in 4 days. Closing was scheduled for 2 days after that. Vivian was about to discover what real authority looked like when wielded by someone who understood both justice and mercy. But mercy would come later. First, she needed to learn what accountability felt like. The last week of my restraining order, Vivian went completely unhinged. She must have sensed something was wrong because her behavior shifted from calculated harassment to pure desperation. Maybe it was the way neighbors had started avoiding her, or the fact that Clearwater Holdings had finally gotten through to her about the illegal showings. Tuesday morning, I watched from my kitchen window as she paced her driveway, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly at nothing. The sound of her voice carried across the street, shrill, panicked, the kind of desperation that makes people do stupid things. No, you don't understand. The eviction notices are fake. I've been living here for 8 years. Someone's trying to frame me. She was talking to her lawyer, apparently, though from what I could see through my telephoto lens, the conversation wasn't going well. By Wednesday, she'd escalated to bribing the postal worker. Mrs. Stella called me that afternoon, barely containing her laughter. "Marcus, you won't believe this. I saw Vivian slip $20 to the mailman to hold all Clearwater Holdings mail for pickup. She's trying to stop her own eviction notices. Federal mail tampering. Another felony to add to her growing collection." But the real show started Thursday when she discovered the Banner Company truck parked outside Mrs. Stella's house. I was in my backyard, legally staying within the restraining order boundaries, when I heard her storm across the street. The slam of her car door echoed like a gunshot through the neighborhood. "What the hell is that?" she screamed at Pete, who was calmly measuring Mrs. Stella's oak trees. "Banner installation, ma'am. Permits approved through the Homeowners Association." "I am the Homeowners Association. Nobody authorized this." Pete looked at his clipboard with the patience of a man who dealt with difficult customers for 30 years. "According to my paperwork, this was approved by the incoming HOA management, some company called Fletcher Property Services." The silence that followed was beautiful. I could practically hear the gears grinding in Vivian's head as she tried to process what Fletcher Property Services might be. She spent the rest of Thursday frantically calling every neighbor, trying to figure out who had hired a Banner company and what it meant. The desperation in her voice was pure music as she left increasingly unhinged voicemails. "This is Vivian Blackwood, your HOA president. Someone is trying to undermine our community standards with unauthorized signage. Call me immediately." By Friday, she'd moved to sabotage. I woke up to find my truck's tires slashed, all 4 of them, clean cuts that screamed of someone who'd finally snapped. The rubber smell mixed with morning dew as I documented the damage with my camera. But Vivian had made a critical mistake. My security cameras, installed after the first round of harassment, had captured everything in high-definition clarity. Her distinctive white BMW pulling up at 3 a.m., her designer sneakers crunching on gravel, the kitchen knife glinting in the streetlight as she worked. Criminal mischief, destruction of property, and violating a restraining order, all in one beautiful video file. The police were very interested in the footage. "Ma'am, this clearly shows you on Mr. Fletcher's property in violation of your own restraining order," Officer Rodriguez explained to Vivian that afternoon. "Plus, destruction of property worth over $500 makes this a felony." "That's not me," she insisted, even as the video clearly showed her face in the streetlight. "Someone's trying to frame me. This whole neighborhood is conspiring against me." The paranoia was complete now. 8 years of unchecked power, followed by a week of losing control, had broken something fundamental in her brain. Saturday night, she tried to burn down Mrs. Stella's oak trees. I woke up to sirens and the acrid smell of gasoline smoke. Fire department, police, and paramedics filled the street with flashing lights that turned the neighborhood into a disco from hell. Vivian had poured gasoline around the base of the trees, where the banner was scheduled to be installed, but apparently didn't understand that wet wood doesn't ignite easily. The fire had mostly just scorched the grass and filled the air with toxic smoke. She was out there with a gas can and a lighter, Mrs. Stella told the fire chief, her voice shaking, screaming about stopping the banner installation, something about taking back her neighborhood. They found Vivian passed out in her backyard, overwhelmed by smoke inhalation from her own arson attempt. The paramedics loaded her into an ambulance while police photographed the evidence. As the ambulance pulled away, I realized something profound. I'd wanted justice, but what I was watching was complete mental collapse. The restraining order expired tomorrow, and my property closing was Monday. But looking at the charred grass and smelling the lingering gasoline, I wondered if there would be anything left of Vivian to hold accountable when this was all over. The war was almost won, but victory was starting to taste like ashes. Vivian was released from the hospital Sunday morning, just 12 hours before my restraining order expired. I watched her stumble out of a taxi, her usually perfect hair hanging limp around her shoulders, her designer outfit replaced with hospital scrubs that hung on her frame like a surrender flag. The woman who'd terrorized our neighborhood for 8 years looked like she'd aged a decade in one night, but the dangerous glint in her eyes told me she wasn't broken yet, just desperate enough to try something truly destructive. The banner installation was scheduled for 4 p.m., perfect timing for the neighborhood celebration that would start at 6. Mrs. Stella had coordinated everything with military precision. Potluck dishes, lawn chairs, even a small speaker system for community announcements. At noon, Vivian made her final play. A white van pulled up to her house with "Emergency Property Services" painted on the side. 3 men in work clothes started unloading equipment: generators, floodlights, and what looked like commercial-grade sound equipment. Mrs. Stella called immediately. "Marcus, she's setting up something big in her backyard. It looks like she's planning some kind of counter-event." Through my telephoto lens, I watched Vivian directing the workers like a general, positioning artillery. She was planning to drown out our celebration with noise, lights, anything to disrupt the moment she somehow sensed was coming. By 2 p.m., her backyard looked like a concert venue. Massive speakers pointed toward the street, floodlights aimed at Mrs. Stella's oak trees, and generators humming with enough power to light a small stadium. "Attention Willowbrook residents," her amplified voice suddenly boomed across the neighborhood. "An illegal gathering is planned for this evening. As your HOA president, I'm implemented emergency noise restrictions." The feedback screech from her sound system was loud enough to rattle windows. Dogs started barking throughout the neighborhood as she continued her electronic assault. "Unaccountage will be removed. Illegal assemblies will be dispersed. Order will be maintained." But she'd made one crucial error. The sound ordinance she was violating carried automatic fines of $500 per violation, and her amplified rants had been going on for 2 hours. At 3:30 p.m., 3 police cruisers arrived in response to noise complaints from every house within 6 blocks. "Ma'am, you need to shut down this equipment immediately," Sergeant Williams announced through his patrol car's PA system, trying to be heard over Vivian's electronic sermon. "I have authority here. This is my neighborhood." "Ma'am, step away from the microphone." What happened next was pure theater. Vivian, cornered and desperate, grabbed the microphone like it was a weapon and started screaming about conspiracies, frame-ups, and how everyone was trying to steal her kingdom. "They're all working together. The mailman, the neighbors, even the police. I built this community, and they're trying to destroy it." The paranoid breakdown was happening in real time, broadcast to half the city through her own sound system. It took 4 officers to physically remove her from the equipment. The generators shut down with a mechanical wheeze, and sudden silence fell over the neighborhood like a blanket. As they loaded Vivian into the back of a patrol car, I realized my closing was tomorrow morning, and she still had no idea what was coming. At 4 p.m. sharp, Pete arrived with the banner. The installation took 15 minutes. Professional grommets, weather-resistant mounting hardware, perfectly stretched between Mrs. Stella's oak trees. The banner was beautiful in its simplicity. "Welcome home to Willowbrook's new property management company," in bold blue letters against white vinyl. But we kept it folded until 6 p.m., waiting for the perfect moment. Neighbors started gathering at 5:30, carrying folding chairs and covered dishes. The smell of barbecued chicken mixed with the lingering scent of charred grass from Vivian's arson attempt. Kids ran around with sidewalk chalk, finally free to create art without fear of HOA violations. At 6 p.m. exactly, Mrs. Stella's grandson pulled the release rope. The banner unfurled like a sail catching wind, and 20 neighbors burst into applause, not because they understood what it meant yet, but because anything that opposed Vivian felt like victory. That's when I stepped forward with the microphone Jake had set up for recording. Neighbors, friends, thank you all for coming tonight. I have an announcement that's going to change everything. From her patrol car window, Vivian was watching through the mesh screen, her face pressed against the glass. She could see the celebration, the banner, the cameras recording everything, but she still didn't know the punchline was coming. Tomorrow morning, I officially become the owner of every property on Maple Court. The silence was perfect. Even the kids stopped playing, including the house that Vivian Blackwood has been renting for 8 years. The explosion of gasps, laughter, and applause nearly drowned out the sound of Vivian screaming from inside the police car. The patrol car door slammed open, and Vivian burst out like a woman possessed. "That's impossible!" she screamed, charging toward our celebration, with 2 police officers scrambling behind her. "You can't buy houses. You're nobody. I'm the president." The crowd parted as she stormed through, her hospital scrubs flapping, her face twisted with 8 years of unchecked arrogance finally meeting reality. "Officer Williams, please escort Ms. Blackwood back to the vehicle," Sergeant Martinez called out. But Vivian was beyond listening to anyone. She grabbed the microphone from my hand with surprising strength, her voice cracking through the speaker system. "Don't listen to him. He's lying. I've lived here for 8 years. This is my neighborhood." 20 neighbors watched in stunned silence as their former dictator had a complete meltdown in front of professional cameras. "Actually, Vivian," I said calmly, pulling out the purchase agreement from my jacket pocket, "you've been renting here for 8 years, from Clearwater Holdings, who sold me the entire block." The paper rustled in the evening breeze as I held it up for everyone to see. 12 properties, closed this morning, including 47 Maple Court. "Show me those papers!" she shrieked, lunging for the documents. "They're fake! Someone forged them!" Officer Rodriguez stepped between us, his voice carrying the patience of someone who dealt with plenty of mental health crises. "Ma'am, property records are public information. We can verify ownership right here." He pulled out his phone, accessing the county assessor's database, while Vivian paced like a caged animal. "Property at 47 Maple Court. Owner of record as of this morning. Fletcher Property Management, LLC. The gasp from Mrs. Stella was loud enough to hear 3 houses away. "That's not possible," Vivian whispered, her voice suddenly small and broken. "I've been selling that house. I have buyers. I have deposits. You've been committing real estate fraud," I said quietly. "Selling property you don't own. Taking deposits for a house that belongs to Clearwater Holdings. Who sold it to me?" The weight of her crimes was finally sinking in. Real estate fraud, mail tampering, destruction of property, violating restraining orders, arson. 8 years of small-time tyranny had escalated into federal felonies, but the crowd was getting restless, and Jake's cameras were still rolling. "So what happens now?" Mrs. Stella asked, her voice carrying decades of suppressed curiosity about justice. I pulled out a manila folder, thick with legal documents Mike had prepared. "Well, as the new property owner, I have some lease agreements to discuss." Vivian's face went white as I opened the folder. Standard lease terms for all Maple Court residents, fair rent, transparent policies, and uniform enforcement of community standards. I looked directly at her. "Including compliance with all HOA rules that tenants have been following for years." "You can't evict me!" she screamed. "I have rights!" "I've been here 8 years. Actually, you have the same rights as every other month-to-month tenant." I handed her a crisp white envelope. 30 days notice to comply with lease terms, or 30 days to vacate. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope, her eyes scanning the violation list Mike had crafted with surgical precision. Unauthorized lawn ornaments, 8 garden gnomes at $75 each, illegal parking blocking pedestrian walkways, daily violations for 3 months, unauthorized surveillance equipment, 4 cameras without written permission. Each violation was exactly what she'd been writing up against neighbors for years. "You owe approximately $4,000 in back fines, plus current month's rent." I smiled. "But I'm willing to work out a payment plan." The crowd started laughing. Not cruel, but the kind of relief that comes when justice finally shows up fashionably late to the party. "This is harassment," Vivian screamed at the police officers. "Arrest him! He's the one breaking laws!" Sergeant Martinez looked at the cameras, the celebrating neighbors, and the property documents in my hand. "Ma'am, Mr. Fletcher appears to be following standard landlord-tenant procedures. If you'd like to dispute the lease terms, you'll need to consult with an attorney." "But I'm the HOA president." "Ma'am, you're a tenant. The HOA president is whoever the property owners elect." Mrs. Stella raised her hand like she was in school. "I nominate Marcus Fletcher for HOA president." The vote was unanimous. 20 hands shot up while Vivian stood in the middle of the circle, finally understanding that her 8-year reign was over. All in favor of new community standards, transparency, fairness, and equal treatment for everyone? Another unanimous vote. Vivian sank onto Mrs. Stella's lawn, the fight finally going out of her as the reality settled in. She wasn't the neighborhood queen anymore. She was just another tenant, and I was her landlord. "Welcome to the new Willowbrook, Vivian. Population, everyone who actually lives here." 6 months later, Maple Court had become the neighborhood everyone wanted to live in. Vivian moved out quietly after 2 weeks, unable to afford the back rent, and unwilling to follow the same rules she'd forced on others for years. Her last day, she loaded a U-Haul in complete silence, while Mrs. Stella's roses bloomed freely at their natural height. The real estate fraud charges were dropped in exchange for paying restitution to the people she'd conned with fake house showings. Turns out, destroying someone's life through legal channels is more satisfying than putting them in prison. Her corner house now belonged to the Martinez family, good people who'd been priced out of homeownership until I offered them rent-to-own terms at below market rate. Bob Martinez fixed the basketball hoop his kids had been banned from using for 3 years. The HOA transformation was everything I'd hoped for. Monthly dues dropped from $200 to $75, with every dollar accounted for in quarterly reports posted online. No more mysterious consulting fees disappearing into board members' pockets. Mrs. Stella became our new secretary, her rose garden, the crown jewel of our relaxed landscaping standards. The Henderson Kids Sidewalk chalk art was officially designated as community beautification, and someone usually left fresh chalk for any kid who wanted to contribute. We held monthly potluck dinners in the community space I'd converted from Vivian's old office. Real community building, not the fake authority she'd tried to create through fear and fines. But the best part was watching the neighborhood kids play freely again. The sound of laughter and bicycle wheels on pavement replaced the angry silence that had hung over our streets for years. From a business perspective, the investment paid off faster than my accountant had projected. Property values increased 18% within 6 months as word spread about our community transformation. The waiting list for available units stretched 3 months out. I'd learned something important about power. It works better when you share it instead of hoarding it. The other 11 properties became homes for families who'd been squeezed out by rising rents elsewhere. Veterans got priority through my VA connections, along with teachers, firefighters, and other people who actually serve their communities. Most importantly, we established the Willowbrook Community Fund, a scholarship program for local kids funded through rental profits. Mrs. Stella coordinated with the school district to identify families needing help with everything from school supplies to college applications. The first scholarship recipients were announced at our 6-month anniversary celebration. 5 kids getting $2,000 each toward their education, funded by the same rental income that once went to Clearwater Holdings' tax problems. Jake Morrison, our videographer, had turned that first night's footage into a documentary about HOA reform that got picked up by 3 local news stations. We started getting calls from other neighborhoods dealing with similar situations, asking for advice on fighting back against corrupt board members. My construction business doubled in size as neighbors recommended Fletcher Contracting to friends throughout the city. Turns out, people trust contractors who use their skills to help communities instead of just making money. The legal precedent we set helped pass city ordinances requiring HOA financial transparency and limiting board member terms. Sometimes winning one battle helps other people win their wars. Sarah and I even had coffee last month. First time since the divorce where we talked like friends instead of former spouses. She admitted that helping me buy the neighborhood was the most fun she'd had at work in years. "You know," she said, stirring her latte, "watching you destroy that woman's little kingdom was better than therapy. We're not getting back together, but we're not enemies anymore either. Sometimes justice heals more than just the obvious wounds. These days, I wake up in the same house where this story started, but everything else has changed. My coffee tastes better, my neighbors wave instead of avoiding eye contact, and kids draw rainbows in chalk on my sidewalk. Vivian taught me an important lesson. Power without accountability always destroys itself. I just helped speed up the process. Got your own HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments. You're not alone, and there are more ways to fight back than you might think. And if you enjoyed watching justice served with a side of real estate revenge, hit that subscribe button. Next week's story involves a city councilwoman who tried to shut down a veteran's food truck and learned why you should never mess with someone who understands both military logistics and social media warfare. Trust me, that one gets even wilder.